All right, so today we're going to be looking at the central nervous system. This is all from the chapter 48 reading that you had done the previous day. And this first section, we're going to be looking at the basics of the central and peripheral nervous system, also known as the CNS and PNS, respectively. A little bit about the nervous system and an overview of this. The nervous system performs three overlapping functions, and you can go ahead and follow along on your lesson outline, and we'll pause along the way if you need to finish filling those questions out. There are three overlapping functions. That's sensory input, integration, and motor output. These three functions are sent out to what is known as the effector cells. And so, when you sense information at first, it goes in through your sensory cells, which become integrated in particular centers of your brain before it releases some type of response. And, all of this process, they all take place in a very short amount of time. Milliseconds take place before, you go from sensory integration to motor output. The central nervous system is involved in a couple of things. It actually integrates information. It interconnects nerves of the two nervous system types, the peripheral and the central, and it also participates in the relay signaling between the motor and sensory neurons of the CNS and PNS. So in other words, when you have sensory input, let's say it comes through the eye, it goes in and becomes integrated in centers of your brain. The brain then kind of locates information that may connect with the sensory input, kind of makes sense of it, and then a signal is sent out to, conduct some kind of corresponding motor output. So these are all part of then the central nervous system, which is composed of the brain and spinal cord, and all the nerves that compose what's known as the PNS, or the peripheral nervous system. Here's a brain map that kind of just demonstrates all the areas of the brain here, with the various lobes, the main ones being the parietal, the frontal, the temporal, and occipital lobes for four major areas of the brain, along with the cerebellum and this area here, which is known as the medulla oblongata. It's kind of a funny name, but it is the center for all of the major functions of the human body. Now, there are a couple of interesting regions here, one of which is the occipital lobe. This is the area that sort of integrates vision and visual stimuli. So it makes sense of what you see. And if any of those areas back here in the occipital lobe are damaged, of course, that's going to affect how you interpret what you see. Ironically, next to that is this area here, which is a little kind of forward in the temporal lobe, and this participates in facial recognition. There's actually a story of a man, they wrote a book about a man who mistook his wife for a hat, who had a particular disorder, aproplasia, who was unable to recognize or differentiate normal objects from people. Some of the constituents of the central nervous system and PNS, what makes it up? Here are the constituents of the two: neurons, glial cells, and here we're looking at an image. It's an electron micrograph of what an individual neuron looks like. Here you're looking at the cell body, which is sort of the hub or the home of the neuron, and it contains the nucleus. Attached to it, sort of the thicker regions here, and they look like kind of the thicker trunks of the cell body, are what are known as the axon hillock. These guys connect to where you would find the synaptic terminals and the nodes of Ranvier, or the exposed regions not covered up by the myelin sheaths, or what the individual units are called, which are these Schwann cells, and allow for electrical conductivity. And yes, your brain does conduct electricity, which is why when we hook you up to an electroencephalogram, it measures the brain waves or electrical currents that come off your skull. So it's kind of an interesting way in which we sort of power up our bodies. We're living batteries, if you want to think of it that way. The signals are sent out to the very ends, called the dendrites, before they attach to neighboring cells, and they can release either electrical signals and or neurotransmitters alongside. Let's stop here, and before we look at the basics of neural signaling, go ahead and finish up those lesson notes, and we're going to go ahead and finish the rest of that lesson up when we come back.